You're at a friend's birthday dinner, 6 people around a table, when the check comes and somebody jokes about splitting it based on who makes more. Everyone laughs. Nobody actually knows what anyone else at that table makes, not really, just the version they've each pieced together from a car in the parking lot or a trip someone posted about last spring. You think about your own number on the drive home. Not the salary, the other one, the one sitting quietly in an account nobody at that dinner has ever asked about. Here's something most people find out too late. Your paycheck was never designed to make you free. It was designed to keep you functional, showing up, paying rent, staying just comfortable enough not to leave. You can make 6 figures and still feel like you're one bad month from a problem, and that's not a personal failure. It's just what a paycheck is built to do. Look at any list of the wealthiest people in the country and you'll notice something. You won't find logged the most hours or never missed a shift. You'll find people who own things, companies, buildings, patents, portfolios, things that keep producing value whether they're awake or not. The guy who built the biggest online retailer in the world didn't get rich because that company paid him a great salary. He got rich because he owned it. That's the entire gap between income and wealth that almost nobody explains clearly. Income is what you trade your hours for. Wealth is what keeps working after you've clocked out. You're about to walk through the exact split I used to close that gap. 4 numbers instead of one paycheck, and the reasoning behind each piece of it, using 2 people I've talked to about their own numbers so none of this stays abstract. The trap most people never name. There's a guy I'll call Preston Vale. 31, makes $71,000 as an operations manager at a regional distributor. Good job, real title, a 401k he barely thinks about. Preston told me once, almost as a joke, that he genuinely doesn't know where his paycheck goes every month. It arrives, it leaves, and by the 3rd week, he's checking his account balance before agreeing to plans with friends. That's not a Preston problem. That's what happens to almost anyone whose entire financial life is one number: income, with nothing underneath it directing where that number actually goes. I asked him once to just pull up his account and read me the balance out loud. No judgment attached. Purely curious. He hesitated for a second before he did it, the way most people hesitate before reading a number out loud to someone else. Even a friend, even over nothing more than a beer. $340 in checking, 4 days before payday. He'd been at that job 3 years, gotten 2 raises in that time, and the number sitting between him and an actual emergency hadn't meaningfully moved the entire time he'd been earning more. That's the specific thing a raise alone never fixes on its own. Here's the shift that changes it. Stop asking, how do I make more, at least as the only question, and start asking, what do I actually own? Skills that scale beyond your current job, assets that grow whether you're paying attention to them or not, systems that produce cash flow without needing your hours attached to every dollar. Until something like that exists in your life, you're not building anything. You're just renting your life back from your rent, your car payment, your credit card balance, month after month, forever. The reason discipline alone doesn't fix this isn't a willpower problem either. It's a decision fatigue problem. Every single day you're quietly choosing between saving and spending, investing and delaying. Dozens of tiny choices that exhaust the same part of your brain by 4 p.m. that convinces you the delivery app is a reasonable idea. Systems win where discipline fails because a system removes the choice entirely. You decide once, you build a structure, and the structure runs whether you're motivated that day or not. That's the whole idea behind the split I want to walk you through, something I call the 4-way method, because it's less about earning more right now and more about directing what you already have with actual precision. The 4-way split: 50% covers your real essentials, the actual cost of living, not the inflated version most people quietly accept. 25% goes to growth, investments, skills, the things that compound. 15% goes to stability, your buffer against the stuff that goes wrong. And the last 10% is yours completely, guilt-free, no justification required. This works whether you're bringing in $3,000 a month or $13,000 a month. The percentages don't change, only the dollar amounts inside them do. Most people run this exact structure backwards. They spend first, save whatever happens to survive the month, and never invest at all because there's rarely anything left by the time saving even enters the conversation. This flips it. You pay your future first, protect yourself second, live within real limits third, and enjoy guilt-free fourth. It isn't restrictive once you actually run it. It's just intentional in an order most people have never tried on purpose. The 25%, and why it matters more than the raise you're chasing. This is the piece that actually builds wealth, not your job title, what your money does after you've already earned it. The 25% you send to growth is the difference between working until you're 70 out of necessity and having real options at 50. Pay yourself first isn't a mood, it's an operational move. If you wait until the end of the month to invest whatever's left, nothing will be left, because spending expands to fill whatever room it's given. The only real fix is removing the money from your own reach before you can spend it, automating the transfer the same day your income lands. Time matters more than amount here every single time. Someone who invests $600 a month starting at 25 and stops entirely at 35 will end up with more at 65 than someone who waits until 35 to start and keeps investing that same $600 a month for the next 30 years. That's not a trick. That's just what compounding does to a decade-long head start. Starting small now beats waiting to start big later almost every time you actually run the math. Where the 25% should go isn't about picking a hot stock or timing anything. Think of it as a ladder, safest at the bottom, more exposure as your foundation gets stronger. Start with high-yield savings and government-backed options. Boring, but they protect what you've built while still earning more than a regular checking account. Next comes broad market exposure through low-cost index funds, buying the entire market instead of betting on any single company inside it. The S&P 500 has averaged close to 10% a year over long stretches of history. You're not trying to beat that number, you're trying to consistently match it. After the index fund foundation, the ladder keeps climbing in a specific order, and the order matters more than people think. Real estate exposure through funds that let you own a slice of income-producing property without becoming a landlord yourself comes next, offering rental income and appreciation without a 2 a.m. call about a broken water heater. After that, ordinary stock ownership in individual companies, but only the kind you actually understand well enough to explain to someone else in one sentence. Utilities, consumer staples, healthcare, the unglamorous sectors that keep existing through recessions instead of the ones trending on financial social media that week, held through the downturns instead of panic sold the first time a headline gets scary. For people who've already built a real foundation across the first few rungs, genuine risk tolerance and money they can actually afford to lose without it changing their month, building something of your own sits further up the ladder. A small business, a content platform, a service. Income that isn't capped by an hourly rate at all because it isn't tied to your hours in the first place. And at the very top, the highest volatility stuff, cryptocurrency, collectibles, things that require real understanding before you touch them and shouldn't make up more than a small sliver even for someone experienced. If you can't explain clearly why something has value, you're speculating, not investing, and that distinction matters more than almost anything else on this list. Most people's mistake isn't investing in the wrong things exactly, it's climbing the ladder out of order, chasing the volatile stuff at the top before the boring foundation at the bottom is anywhere close to be built. Here's the part almost nobody puts first, even though it should be. The highest return investment most people will ever make isn't in the market at all, it's in themselves. An $1,800 course in a skill that raises your earning ceiling by $18,000 a year is a return no index fund, no single stock, nothing in a brokerage account will ever
reliably match in year one. After that comes real estate exposure through funds that let you own a slice of income-producing property without becoming a landlord yourself. And after that, ordinary stock ownership in companies you actually understand and believe will still exist in 20 years, boring sectors held through the downturns instead of panicked out of. For people with a real foundation already built and genuine risk tolerance, building something of your own, a small business, a content platform, a service, offers upside that isn't capped by an hourly rate at all. And at the very end of the ladder, the highest volatility stuff, cryptocurrency, collectibles, things that require real understanding before you touch them. If you can't explain clearly why something has value, you're speculating, not investing, and that distinction matters more than almost anything else on this list. Preston's version of this, once he actually built it, was almost embarrassingly simple. $250 a month into an index fund, automated the same day his paycheck landed, plus one $600 certificate in a data analysis skill his company was quietly starting to pay a premium for internally. 8 months later, that certificate turned into a $6,200 raise, a return that no part of his 401k came anywhere close to matching in the same window. None of that worked because Preston suddenly found more willpower. It worked because he removed the decision from every single payday going forward. The transfer fires automatically, the index fund purchase happens the same day, and the only choice he ever actually made was the one Sunday afternoon he set the whole thing up. He told me the strangest part wasn't the $6,200 raise, it was realizing 3 months in that he hadn't thought about the $250 transfer even once since he built it. It just happens now, the same way rent happens, except this one is quietly working for him instead of just leaving. The 15% that keeps an emergency from becoming a collapse. Most people don't actually have a money problem, they have a stability problem. One car repair turns into a credit card balance. One medical bill quietly derails 6 months of progress that took years to build. It's rarely that someone's bad with money, it's that they're one ordinary bad week away from financial collapse, with nothing built underneath them to catch it. That's exactly what the 15% solves. It isn't meant to grow aggressively, it's protection, the buffer that keeps you from having to sell your growth investments at the worst possible moment, the month the market's down and the transmission also happens to die. Here's how you actually size it. Add up your real monthly essentials: rent, utilities, groceries, insurance, the debt payments you can't avoid. Then multiply that number by 5 or 6. If your essentials run $2,800 a month, your target sits somewhere between $14,000 and $16,800. Keep it somewhere fully liquid, zero volatility, a small reliable yield attached. A high-yield savings account earning somewhere around 4 to 5% works well, keeping roughly even with inflation while staying completely accessible whenever you actually need it. Building it takes real time, and that's fine. Even $120 or $180 a month, automated the same way as everything else, adds up faster than it feels like it will. And the one rule that actually matters once it exists: the moment you use it, you refill it first, before anything else, the same way you'd repay a loan you took from yourself. A woman I'll call Odalis Ferreira, a dental hygienist, built hers slowly over about 2 years, mostly in $75 automated chunks she genuinely forgot she was sending most months. When her transmission failed last spring, a $1,140 repair that would have gone straight onto a card 18 months earlier, she paid it from the fund in an afternoon and had it refilled within 6 weeks. She told me the actual relief wasn't the repair getting fixed, it was that the whole event never once became a conversation with anyone about how she was going to cover it. She mentioned something else, almost in passing, that stuck with me more than the repair story itself. The 2 years before she built the fund, she said, every single unexpected expense felt like a personal referendum, proof she wasn't managing things well enough, evidence to feel bad about. The transmission failing didn't feel like that at all. It felt like weather, something that happened, got handled, and was over by Friday. That shift from a crisis being about her character to a crisis just being a line item is most of what the 15% is actually buying underneath the dollar figure itself. The 50% and the 2 categories quietly wrecking almost everyone's version of it. This is where clarity gets forced whether you want it or not. What actually counts as essential? Housing, food, basic transportation, utilities, insurance. That's genuinely it. Everything past that list is a comfort wearing a necessities clothes. You don't need the premium version of the streaming bundle. You don't need name brand groceries across the entire cart. And you almost certainly don't need a car payment quietly eating a fifth of your entire take-home income every single month. The 2 categories that wreck this 50% for most people are always the same 2: housing and transportation. People stretch for the absolute maximum mortgage or lease they technically qualify for, then wonder later why nothing's left to save. They finance a car they can't really afford because the monthly number feels manageable in isolation, then stay trapped inside that payment for 6 years. Here's a specific version of the math. If you bring home $4,600 a month, your essentials cap sits at $2,300. If rent alone is $1,650 and a car payment adds another $460, you've already burned 91% of your entire essentials budget before groceries, insurance, or a single utility bill even enters the picture. At that point, you're not building anything, you're just servicing a lifestyle you can't actually afford yet. Preston ran this exact math on himself the same week he set up the automated transfer, and it wasn't a comfortable afternoon. His rent was $1,300, reasonable enough on its own, but the lease on a 2-year-old pickup he'd financed at $520 a month pushed his essentials to $1,820, against a cap of roughly $2,050. Almost nothing left for the actual necessities underneath those two big line items. He didn't sell the truck immediately, and he told me later he probably wouldn't have listened if a video had told him that same week. What changed his mind was running the number himself out loud on his own kitchen table 6 months later, after the $250 transfer and the certificate had already started proving the structure worked elsewhere in his life first. He traded the truck for something 4 years older with a $210 payment and redirected the difference straight into the 25% instead. The fix isn't deprivation, it's specificity. A smaller place in the general area genuinely evaluated instead of automatically ruled out. A reliable used car instead of financing something new. A $43,000 financed SUV ends up costing closer to $54,000 once the interest is counted, and keeps you tied to that number the entire time. Run the real math on a $460 monthly car payment held for 10 years. That's $55,200 total. Invested instead at a steady 8%, that same money becomes something closer to $87,000. You're never really choosing between a nicer car and a boring one. You're choosing between a car and a meaningfully different decade. A few small rules make this easier to hold without constant willpower. Wait 48 hours for any non-essential purchase over $100. Use actual cash for discretionary spending when you can. It's psychologically harder to hand over than tapping a card. And a simple filter for anything bigger. Only buy it if you've genuinely wanted it for 30 days straight and it replaces something you already own instead of just adding to the pile. The 10% that keeps the whole system from breaking. Cut too hard for too long, and almost everyone hits the same wall eventually, burnout, followed by a resentful binge that undoes months of careful decisions in a single bad weekend. Extreme restriction doesn't actually build wealth, it builds a backlash you end up paying for later. That's exactly what the final 10% exists, and it isn't a reward tacked on for good behavior, it's structural. The system doesn't hold together without it. This is guilt-free spending. Ideally sitting in a separate account so it feels psychologically distinct from every other number in your life. It's a fixed percentage, not a fixed dollar amount, so as your income grows, this grows right along with it automatically. Concerts, dinners out, a hobby, a trip, whatever actually brings you something real. No justification required, no guilt attached afterward. One distinction worth keeping in mind here. Experiences tend to outlast objects. A dinner with people you like becomes a memory you still have years later. A new gadget becomes clutter in a drawer within 18 months. The specific high of buying something new fades within days almost every time. The story from a weekend away tends to stick around for years. None of this is about denying yourself anything real. It's about making the 10% intentional instead of accidental, so you stop quietly compensating with impulse purchases that were never actually that satisfying to begin with.
What the whole structure actually builds. Run this consistently and here's what happens, without much drama attached to any single month of it. The 25% compounds quietly in the background. Your skills raising your ceiling, your assets appreciating whether you're watching closely or not. The 15% means an emergency becomes an inconvenience instead of a catastrophe, a bad week instead of a bad year. The 50% forces real clarity about what you're actually spending on versus what you're spending to prove something to people who mostly aren't paying attention anyway. And the 10% keeps the entire structure sustainable, so you're not white-knuckling through your 20s and 30s waiting for some distant future version of freedom to finally arrive. Preston still drives the same modest car he traded into. Odalis still works the same hygienist job, same hours, same patience. From the outside, nothing about either of their lives looks any different than it did 2 years ago. No new zip code, no vacation photos that read differently than anyone else's. That's sort of the entire point. Wealth built this way was never going to announce itself with a nicer car in a parking lot. It was always going to look like 4 automated transfers nobody else will ever see, running quietly, on schedule, whether anyone's watching or not. The number that actually changed for both of them isn't visible at a birthday dinner or in a parking lot. It's sitting in a handful of accounts neither of them talks about much, growing a little every month in a way that would be almost boring to watch in real time and only becomes obvious when you compare one year's spreadsheet to the next. That's the whole trade being made here. Giving up the version of progress you can show someone at dinner for the version that's actually still there in 10 years. If you want the exact percentages laid out for your own number, stick around and I'll see you in the next one.